You know, when you think about a classic compass, like the kind they used to navigate ships across the ocean centuries ago, there is this expectation of absolute, undeniable certainty.
Right. It's completely binary.
Exactly. You hold it flat, the needle swings, and it points north.
Mm.
You are either heading the right way or you are not. But imagine taking that same reliable vintage compass and dropping it right into the middle of a modern server farm.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Surrounded by massive magnetic fields and spinning hard drives.
Right. Invisible data streams everywhere. Suddenly, that needle starts spinning wildly. The environment itself makes the old tool seem completely obsolete. And, I mean, that is exactly what Marvel did to Captain America in 2014.
They really did.
They took a human compass who only pointed true north, dropped him into this modern labyrinth of espionage, and just watched the needle spin.
It forces a total loss of bearings.
Yeah.
The rules of navigation fundamentally change when you move from a battlefield where the enemy wears a distinct uniform to, well, a shadow war where the person in the cubicle next to you might actually be the threat.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. Today, we are exploring the source material on the 2014 film Captain America, The Winter Soldier. And for everyone listening, our goal is to uncover exactly how the creators took a literal black and white 1940s Boy Scout and successfully dropped him into a cynical, modern geopolitical landscape.
And they did it without completely breaking the character, which is the really impressive part.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because this film isn't just a typical superhero movie with capes and lasers. To set the stage for you, Steve Rogers, Captain America, wakes up in the 21st century and starts working for the global espionage agency SHIELD.
But he quickly uncovers that his supposed allies have been secretly infiltrated.
Right, over decades by the evil organization HYDRA. And this infiltration is culminating in a terrifying conspiracy involving predictive algorithms and preemptive lethal strikes from these giant flying warships called helicarriers.
Yeah, and to understand why this movie resonates so well and why it's often considered a high watermark for this franchise, we really have to look at its structural DNA. The filmmakers entirely abandoned the nostalgic, golden-hued World War II war film aesthetic of the first movie. Instead, they stepped right into the murky, paranoia-filled shadows of a 1970s political thriller.
I mean, producer Kevin Feige and directors Anthony and Joe Russo purposely designed it to be a 70s conspiracy film masquerading as a massive summer blockbuster.
Which is such a wild pivot.
I find that genre shift fascinating. It is a huge gamble for a sequel. The writers, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, actually looked directly at classic conspiracy films. Movies like 3 Days of the Condor, The Parallax View, and Marathon Man.
They actually went as far as mapping the narrative structure of 3 Days of the Condor directly onto this script.
Wait, really? Directly onto it?
Yeah. For anyone who hasn't seen the 1975 film, it's about a low-level CIA researcher who goes out to lunch, comes back to find all his co-workers assassinated, and has to go on the run without knowing who he can trust.
Oh, wow. That sounds exactly like what happens to Cap.
Exactly. The audience learns the terrifying truth at the exact same pace as the protagonist. By applying that specific mechanic to Captain America, you isolate the hero.
Right.
In the modern era they created for him, everyone around Steve Rogers seems dirty, underhanded, and completely compromised.
And the script also deliberately tackles incredibly topical issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Drone warfare, targeted killing, and global surveillance.
Yes. And this is where the timing of the production becomes almost eerie.
Oh, right! Director Joe Russo pointed out how these themes became unbelievably timely right in the middle of their principal photography.
Because that was the exact moment the Edward Snowden NSA surveillance disclosures happened.
Right. The cultural anxiety about civil liberties, mass surveillance, and preemptive strikes was suddenly dominating every single news cycle.
Now, it's important to state clearly for you listening that we're not taking a political stance on those real-world events, and the film itself isn't a partisan essay.
Absolutely not. We're just looking at the source material here.
Right. But the filmmakers purposefully utilized those boiling, real-world cultural anxieties as a backdrop. They needed a profoundly gray, complicated world to contrast against Captain America's greatest generation way of thinking.
I struggle with this part, though. I mean, if you take a guy who represents 1940s idealism and drop him into a highly cynical post-Snowden world of mass surveillance, shouldn't he just look like an idiot?
You think so, yeah?
Like, how did they avoid turning him into a naive joke or some out-of-touch relic who just doesn't understand how the real world works?
Well, the writers actually identified that as the single biggest trap of the movie. Their solution was to make him, as they described it, the most adaptive man on the planet.
Huh.
The brilliant trick of the screenplay is that the movie never forces Captain America to compromise and fit into the gray world. Instead, it forces the gray world to violently react to Captain America's unyielding moral center.
Oh, I like that. So the conflict isn't about Steve Rogers learning to accept dirty tactics.
No, not at all. It's about the modern world trying and failing to break his refusal to compromise.
And that clash between rigid morals and a shifting world isn't just a plot device either. It is the foundational dynamic of every single relationship he has in the story.
Oh, absolutely.
Look at Scarlett Johansson's character, Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. She is his ultimate foil. She is a character who literally lies for a living. That is her profession.
While Steve Rogers tells the truth,
Exactly.
her moral center is entirely fluid.
Yeah.
She adapts her ethics to whatever the immediate mission requires, while his are entirely fixed.
Right.
Johansson actually pointed out that because they are both profoundly isolated people working for a shadowy government agency, their forced partnership makes them question their own identities.
Which is a great dynamic. She is constantly pushing him to modernize and accept the gray, and he is pushing her to find a level of absolute integrity she hasn't ever allowed herself to have.
But, if Black Widow operates in the gray, Nick Fury is the guy who built the gray.
Oh, for sure. Samuel L. Jackson's character is the ultimate modern compromise.
Jackson noted that almost everything that comes out of Fury's mouth is a lie in some capacity.
And his paranoia drives the entire plot. He's the one pushing S.H.I.E.L.D's secretive preemptive strike program, Project Insight.
He is. He's actively trying to convince this 1940s soldier that enemies are now allies, allies are enemies, and you basically have to shoot first to keep the peace.
Breaking down Nick Fury was essential for the stakes of the film, wasn't it?
Yeah. In a story about dismantling a massive intelligence agency, the traditionally self-assured, untouchable guy has to take the brunt of the hit. Making Fury vulnerable completely spikes the sense of danger for the audience.
And there's a fantastic little detail hidden in the movie about that. After Fury fakes his death, his tombstone features the passage Ezekiel 25.17.
I love that part.
It's a brilliant nod to Jackson's iconic hitman character in Pulp Fiction.
They snuck that in perfectly. But let's take it a step further up the chain of command to Alexander Pierce, the senior official who turns out to be the leader of HYDRA.
Right, played by Robert Redford. And the directors explicitly cast Redford as a deliberate homage to his roles in those exact 1970s thrillers that inspired the script.
That's so clever.
Marvel basically weaponized cinematic nostalgia. They took the ultimate anti-establishment hero of 70s cinema, the guy who uncovered the truth in All the President's Men, and turned him into the modern-day face of the establishment's absolute corruption.
It completely subverts the audience's subconscious trust. You see Robert Redford in a suit, and decades of cinema tell you he is the righteous crusader.
Exactly, you just trust him by default.
And Redford himself was intrigued by the role because he wanted to experience this new form of, quote, high-technology filmmaking, bringing comic books to life.
But while Pierce is the mastermind, the deepest, darkest relationship in the film is obviously between Cap and the Winter Soldier himself, Bucky Barnes.
Right, Steve's childhood best friend, who supposedly died falling off a train in World War II, but has actually been alive this whole time as a brainwashed assassin.
It is a terrifying, dark mirror of Steve's own journey. Kevin Feige highlighted the contrast perfectly. Captain America was frozen in ice, in peaceful, suspended animation for 70 years.
While Bucky was methodically, robotically repurposed as a weapon. He was cryogenically frozen, thawed out to perform a political assassination, mind-wiped through torture, and then frozen again.
Just brutal. And to portray that, Sebastian Stan dove incredibly deep into Cold War history.
He really did. He researched the KGB, watched spy documentaries, and studied real-world brainwashing techniques.
He needed to understand the physical and psychological trauma of a man who is essentially a ghost, violently forced to carry out orders with zero memory of who he used to be.
And Stan's preparation wasn't just mental either. He practiced daily with a plastic knife just so he could execute all of the Winter Soldier's complex knife-flipping tricks on camera himself.
Yeah, he didn't want the directors to have to cut away to a stuntman's hands, which is awesome.
It is. But, all of this heavy, paranoid theme work completely falls apart if Cap is just fighting generic CGI laser monsters.
Oh, absolutely. To sell a gritty 70s thriller vibe, the action had to physically hurt. You can't shoot a movie about government overreach like a shiny, weightless cartoon.
Which is exactly why the directors heavily prioritized practical effects and visceral camera movements.
Director of photography Trent Opalock used handheld cameras to give the audience a naturalistic documentary-style framing.
Yeah, and he paired those with anamorphic lenses. For those unfamiliar, anamorphic lenses give you that classic, slightly distorted, ultra-widescreen look that you immediately associate with 1970s cinema.
They explicitly moved away from blurry, impressionistic action sequences into very specific, staged combat. They even cited the famously intense bank robbery scene in the 1995 film Heat as their major visual influence.
They wanted the gunfire to sound deafening and the physical impacts to look exhausting.
And the actors absolutely had to commit to that realism. Chris Evans trained extensively in parkour, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, karate, and boxing.
The reasoning there is brilliant, too. They wanted his fighting style to reflect a guy who didn't just wake up from the ice and rely on his superpowers.
Right, he woke up and aggressively mastered modern tactical combat. And then you have Anthony Mackie playing Sam Wilson, the Falcon.
Which is a historic casting in its own right. Mackie noted his immense pride in playing the first African-American superhero in this cinematic universe.
And he went all in. Mackie trained relentlessly, eating an 11,000-calorie per day diet and doing 2-a-day workouts for 5 months.
11,000 calories? At first glance, that just sounds absurd.
It does. But when you realize he had to build enough sheer muscle mass to look credible standing next to Chris Evans, while fueling a body that was spending hours every day strapped into heavy practical wire harnesses to simulate flying, it makes complete sense.
The physical toll of the stunts demanded it. The Russos insisted that if they could build it practically, they built it.
We do have to balance that narrative, though, because while they grounded the hand-to-hand combat in sweat and gravity, they still required massive visual effects power for the environment.
Oh, for sure. 6 different VFX companies were brought in to create 2,500 visual effects shots.
Why 6?
Because of the sheer scale of rendering 3 massive digital helicarriers, these weren't just background shapes. They were rendered down to the absolute finest details.
They're like railings, internal hallways, storage areas, individual turbines.
Exactly. They built them that comprehensively so the directors could fly a virtual camera anywhere during the climactic battle and eventually destroy them entirely on screen.
And they had to deal with strict flight restrictions over Washington, D.C.
Right. They couldn't just fly helicopters around the monuments to get action plates. So much of the city itself had to be digitally recreated.
It's an incredible juxtaposition. It's like engineering a billion-dollar, highly classified digital stealth bomber, but insisting the pilot fly it entirely manually with a stick shift.
That's a great way to put it. It marries the massive scale of a comic book universe with the tactile, crunchy reality of an old-school action movie.
And even the quieter moments required this hybrid approach. Like, take the emotional scene where Steve visits an elderly Peggy Carter in the hospital. Haley Atwell performed the scene with tracking markers all over her face. Then a company called Lola VFX digitally transposed the skin texture and facial features of an elderly actress onto Atwell's face.
Which is so much better than the alternative. They chose this over traditional latex prosthetics because heavy makeup often looks rubbery in high definition.
Right, and it restricts the subtle microexpressions an actor uses to convey emotion.
That meticulous attention to the how and why of the visual effects is exactly what sells the reality of the film.
He really is.
It's also fascinating to note the director's mindset during post-production. They actually edited this massive blockbuster in their trailer on the lot of the sitcom Community, where they had previously been working.
I love that. It's a perfect metaphor for their approach, balancing the grand, sweeping scale of a summer tentpole with a very intimate, character-driven focus.
And that dedication to making the movie feel grounded and relatable didn't just stop at the stunts or the digital environments either.
No, it extended to how they tailored the film's smallest details for audiences around the entire globe. This is honestly one of my favorite details we uncovered for you today.
That's so cool.
At the very beginning of the movie, Captain America has a little physical notebook where he's jotting down cultural milestones he needs to catch up on since 1945.
Yeah, the standard version shows things like the moon landing, Steve Jobs, the Berlin Wall, massive historical beats he slept through.
But the studio didn't just shoot that scene once and ship it out. Marvel created 350 different versions of the film to accommodate different formats and international localizations.
And they had to complete all those versions in just 17 days.
Just wild. For the notebook scene, the first 5 items on Cap's list actually changed depending on which country the film was released in. And they didn't just guess what to put there. They had fans vote on the items via online polls.
So think about the version you saw in the theater.
Mm.
Did you realize that visual joke might have been custom tailored specifically for your region?
It's just a masterstroke in audience empathy. The feeling of cultural displacement, of waking up in a world that has rapidly moved on without you, is a universal human concept.
And by localizing that simple notebook, Marvel allowed international audiences to feel a deeply personal connection to a character who is otherwise distinctly, literally named American.
So what does this all mean? I mean, the box office certainly speaks for itself.
Oh yeah, it broke the April opening weekend record with $95 million, earned $714.4 million worldwide, and even snagged an Academy Award nomination for Best Visual Effects.
But beyond the staggering numbers, it proves that even in a $170 million blockbuster featuring digital warships crashing into the Potomac River, it is the hyper-specific, deeply human details that actually anchor the audience to the story.
Spectacle without emotional stakes is just noise. The audience only cares about the helicarriers crashing because they care about the tragic relationship between Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes playing out amidst the wreckage. They care because the film invested time in the philosophical debate between Steve's morality and Nick Fury's pragmatism.
And that brings us back to you listening right now. Whether you are a creative trying to reboot a classic idea, a leader trying to manage a team with conflicting values, or just someone trying to adapt to a rapidly changing, unpredictable workplace, The Winter Soldier offers a masterclass in evolution.
It really teaches us that you don't actually have to abandon your core identity to survive in a modern, complex world.
Instead, you let your steady principles serve as the stark contrast to the chaos around you. You don't let the world spin your compass, you hold your ground and let the world react to your true north.
I think that's a really powerful framework for navigating change.
Yeah.
And, I want to leave you with one final thought, inspired by the darker themes we've explored today.
Go for it.
The entire conflict in this film centers around Project Insight. It's a data mining algorithm originally designed by the villainous Arnim Zola, built to analyze massive amounts of personal data to predict future threats. It forces society to willingly trade their freedom for a feeling of ultimate security. Well, look at our real world today. We navigate a landscape entirely driven by predicted algorithms determining what we buy, what news we read, and how we behave online.
It is everywhere.
It raises a genuinely uncomfortable question. Did we ultimately avoid the fictional Project Insight? Or are we quietly opting into a real-life version of it every single day, eagerly trading away our privacy just for the convenience of a perfectly curated digital life?
Now, there's something to chew on the next time you blindly click, accept terms and conditions, or just scroll through your algorithmically curated feed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your compass steady, and we'll see you next time.